These two cars are virtually identical. They are both 5-speed manual, inline-6 powered BMW M3s of the E36 generation. However, the keen eye among you might notice that they're actually very different in a lot of ways. And although to the DMV these are almost the exact same car minus the model year being off by one, these are actually extremely different cars, and today I'm going to tell you everything about the differences between the two E36s I own and why I chose to sell one of them. Now, when I bought this car over 5 years ago, the goal was to make it into a track car. I knew that from the beginning, but I had absolutely no clue what I was doing or how I was going to make that happen. Didn't know how to build a track car, didn't know how to build a car in general, didn't know anything about these cars as a whole. However, when I bought this car 2 years later, I had a lot more knowledge under my belt. I knew a lot more about these chassis, and that was part of the reason for buying it. I knew that I already had the skills to maintain this car and that it'd be a pretty reliable daily driver if I just took care of it. So as I'm sure you can imagine, with the difference in priorities and goals with driving these two cars, I've treated them very differently throughout my ownership of them. So today I'm going to tell you all the differences between a full track car E36 M3, or at least my track car E36 M3, and what a full stock or almost fully stock daily driver E36 M3 will look like. Now, before I drive either of these two cars, let me tell you a little bit about them first. And we'll start with the street car, seeing as it has the most original equipment and is the best representation of what these cars originally came like. This is a 99 M3 in particular, which means it's OBD2, both of them are. That means that they got the later generation S52 motor, 3.2 liter inline 6, naturally aspirated, produces about 240 horsepower and 236 foot-pounds of torque from the factory. This one's a little different. It's got a Dynon tune on it, which means that it was tuned by the aftermarket BMW tuner Dynon. It also has an intake and exhaust from Dynon as well, and it also has a badge implying that at one point had some other Dynon factory equipment on it. Like the track car, this one is equipped with a 5-speed manual transmission. There was no other manual transmission you would have gotten in the M3 in particular. Probably the most important difference between these cars immediately is the tires. This is still in the factory staggered wheel size with 17-inch wheels all around, but a 225 wide tire up front and a 245 wide tire in the rear. This is kind of plenty of tire for this car, but it does tend to understeer a little bit with those skinnier front tires, in my personal opinion. The other notable highlight for this car is the KW suspension. It's a set of coilovers for this car. It changes out the spring and dampers. You probably know what coilovers are, but nonetheless, it's a pretty soft coilover in the scheme of things. It's not that harsh. It's a very good street coilover in my opinion, but it's not nearly as stiff as what the track car comes with. Otherwise, this is pretty much a bone stock E36 M3. It has the original front seats, the original M steering wheel, even has the original radio in it. Most of the drive and feel of this car is as a E36 M3 would have been from the factory if you had bought it new in the dealership in 1999 when this car was made. Now, by comparison, the track car has a lot more done to it. In fact, it really has just about almost everything done to it. All the bushings have been done, full suspension, sway bars, dampers, everything. Engine is built, cooling upgrades, the differential's built. Steering wheel, shifter, bucket seat, I can go down the list. Everything has been done to this car that is needed for a track car. Didn't start off that way at all. In fact, this came to me as an even more bone stock E36 M3 than the other one I just showed you. But over time, I knew that my goal was to change out just about everything on it and make it into a track car, and that's exactly what I did. On the exterior, the most notable differences are once again the sunroof, the hood vents, and the wheels and tires. Obviously much meatier tires than what you find on the stock M3. This is a 255 square setup. I have seen some people fit as much as a 275 under these fenders with some very aggressive rolling. Although generally this is the common setup you will find for wheels and tires on this car. Aside from the steering wheel, shifter, and the driver's side bucket seat, I still actually have my whole interior stock. I left the passenger seat stock, I left both the rear seats in there, haven't put in a roll cage of any kind. Never really wanted to change out the interior or gut the car, so it's all still there. First, I want to talk about handling, and if we're going to talk about handling, it only makes sense to talk about the car that handles the best, my track car. Now, when I first bought this car over 5 years ago, the first thing I did was took it to a track day. I took it to a track day after having only changed the oil and installed a short shifter. I was on mismatched all-season tires, blown out shocks, And I don't even remember what else was going wrong, but I do remember it was 110 degrees at Thunder Hill, and it was during some of the worst fires that we've had in the history of California. Needless to say that it was terrible conditions for first track day, and the car itself probably wasn't in the most prepared condition it could have been. But it still held up just fine. I think that's a testament to just how robust and strong these cars are. But that said, as I'm driving along on these wonderful back roads, I have to point out that these back roads aren't really the home of this car anymore. There was a time when I actually daily drove this car to school because it just wasn't that modified yet, but I knew from the get-go that I was going to be making this into an all-out track car, and that's exactly what I did. And while I continued to take this car out on back roads as I developed it and enjoyed it in general because I wasn't always at a track day, the simple truth is that now this almost feels like the wrong place for it. I find myself wanting to go double the speed limit and just be on the edge of grip, but that's not the safe thing to do on these kinds of roads. But when I do take it to the track, that's where all the fun begins. As far as street drivability is concerned, I think that this car is actually still in pretty good shape. And by that, I mean that it's still fairly streetable. I don't think you should street this car, and I would only really be daily driving this car if it was my only car, which luckily it isn't. But that said, I still have my interior, I still have AC, I've got creature comforts, I've got navigation with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so I can actually use modern technology. Sure, the bucket seat probably isn't the nicest and most comfortable thing to sit in for long drives, especially on the way to Thunder Hill or Laguna Seca, but at the very least, this car is still comfortable for those drives to the point where I'm not hating my life for every bump and pothole that I go over on the way there. Now, obviously, interior volume is a little bit of an issue in this car. We've just got a lot more noise from, well, everything. There's a lightweight flywheel that rattles like hell. There's the solid engine and transmission mounts that also vibrate the entire car. I feel the vibration in the steering wheel, in my seat, in basically everything. Any little bit of plastic that is loose on the inside rattles exceptionally more because of those stiffened up mounts. The suspension is just a little bit more creaky and noisy because all the bushings are solid on this car. There's not a bit of rubber left. And then things like the differential mounts and transmission mounts definitely make the drive shaft whine just a bit louder. You just hear the differential gear whine all the time going down the freeway. It's not the same as straight cut gears, but it's definitely noticeable. But of course, while all of those may be downsides for street drivability, it's still pretty cool to have a race car just sitting on the street that I know is legal to drive, that I know isn't going to get me in trouble, and that I know can be driven anywhere I need to go if one of my other cars is out for service. Probably one of the most satisfying things about this car is the power band. It is just so linear. Let's do a full pull in second here. It may not be that fast, but it feels so good just having that flat, linear power band. You never get anything unexpected from this car when you put your foot to the floor. It's just flat, linear power all the way to 7,200 RPM. No surging, no turbo lag, just straight, linear, naturally aspirated power. And that's what's so great about these cars in general. They're old, naturally aspirated cars that make pretty decent power for the engine size, and that's all you really need for a good sports car. Now, driver peripherals are probably one of the most important parts of any car. It's the things you interact with the most. Your steering wheel, your shifter, your pedals, the things that you feel everything through and the things that you control everything through. If those don't work very well or you don't like the feel of them, then chances are you're probably not going to enjoy the experience of driving the car in the first place. The E36 comes from the factory with pretty good brakes to begin with, so you don't really have to do anything there aside from make them a little safer for track use, get some pads that can handle the heat a bit better, some fluid, some stainless steel brake lines, but those are pretty typical safety mods for any track car, so I don't think you're really having to bargain much there. Just like the street car, I've done the clutch delay valve, and that makes a pretty big difference, of course. It really helps you improve your clutch timing for shifting. You really do need it for any degree of fast shifting on track, if you ask me. But then come the three slightly harder items. The throttle, The steering and the shifter in this car all require a bit of attention. The throttle itself is actually fine. As a matter of fact, I'm a really big fan of this particular cable-driven throttle. I mean, it's just old-fashioned and to the point, but it has a very direct feel, and I can feel like I'm opening that butterfly valve directly with my foot. That's exactly what you want in a throttle body. But the engine, as it comes from the factory, could use a little tuning. If you're working with an S52 motor in particular, chances are it still has the original intake manifold on it. The M50 manifold is a pretty popular upgrade for track cars, which I've done on this car, but you also could probably do with tuning the motor on top of that. Now, I don't know how to tune cars personally, or rather, I don't know how to tune engines, but a friend of mine does, and he did a pretty good job of tuning this motor to give it a really good linear throttle feel throughout the entire rev range. Obviously, 1,000 to 2,000 RPM is just not as much power as there is at the top end, but in general, this car feels really good on throttle, and it feels really easy, more importantly, to modulate my throttle as I'm going around. Then there's the shifter. In my opinion, the factory shifter on this car kind of sucks, and none of the short shifters really do it any justice. I do have a short shifter on the daily, and it seems like it was installed well, and it feels nice, but it still feels a little sloppy compared to this. And that's just because of the way it's designed. I won't get too much into it. If you know, you know, and if you're looking for an aftermarket BMW shifter, just know that it's more worth it to go chassis mounted if you can, like an RTD shifter or CAE if you're really looking to throw money at it. That said, you'll need to do both a chassis mounted shifter, and if you do that, you'll probably need to do some stiffer engine and transmission mounts to accompany it. And then on top of that, you'll most likely want to do the transmission detents. This is the biggest change that you could possibly do for the shifting feel in this car. If you change out the detents, it makes a world of difference. That said, in order to do that, you have to drop the transmission, so it may not be the most expensive thing in terms of the parts, but the labor probably adds up if you're not doing it yourself, and you need some special tools to do it all in the first place. Lastly, there's the steering. Now, I think steering should be good in a car regardless of whether or not you're tracking it or not. You want the steering to feel however you want it to feel. For me, I want it to be linear. Some people like the non-linear BMW steering racks that have a little bit more wiggle in the middle and lets you kind of be a little bit more loose with your steering until you get a little further out in your steering range. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. I want my steering to be as linear as possible. I want it to be direct, and I want every little movement of the steering wheel to mean something. Unfortunately, the E36 never came like that from the factory, and that's why on this car I've swapped in the steering rack from the Z3 Non-M. Now, the street car may be a bit more tamed down, but that does not mean that it isn't fun. The best part about the E36 is that it's the chassis itself that makes the car so much fun to drive. This car as a whole is just very well balanced and very dynamic at the same time, meaning that it's not a snooze to drive, but it's also never trying to kill you or understeer into oblivion in either way. So it's kind of just the best in between that you could ask for. Handling's obviously not going to be as good as a track car, but I think I've found a way to get a pretty happy middle ground. You don't need the rear control arms, you don't need anything of the sort. All you need is some front camber plates or something similar to it. If you can put just a bit more camber on the front than the rear, maybe about 1 to 1.5 degrees of camber in the rear with 2.5 degrees on the front, something close to that, you'll get a pretty fun, easy to rotate car that doesn't understeer, but also doesn't oversteer too much. It's a pretty perfect balance, and it really depends on how you like to tune your car personally, but I think that this is one of the best cars to just do a little suspension tweaks to, change a few small things, and suddenly you've got yourself a really cool car. And when you're on a freeway on-ramp, it's still no snooze fest. The gearing is a lot longer compared to a track car, so by the time you really try to max out in third gear, I didn't go for it there, but we'd be going a bit more illegally fast, so that's the only downside. You don't really get to hear the engine rev out as much. The track car has that shorter gearing. Third gear only gets you to, high 70s, I think 80 miles an hour, so that's like freeway cruising speed. That's reasonable. This car, third gear, I'm pretty sure top of third is 95 miles an hour or somewhere around there. You're never gonna do a second, third gear, fourth gear pull in this car unless you're going well over 100 miles an hour. Steering leaves a little bit to be desired. The non-linear steering in this car, not really all that fun if I'm being honest. It's okay, it's not terrible, it doesn't feel boaty, it doesn't feel like Mercedes steering, it doesn't feel as bad as the steering in my M5 for example, but it still leaves a little bit to be desired, and that's why I think the Z free rack swap that I did in my track car is probably one of the best mods for this car in general. Here's a controversial opinion that'll probably get me in trouble. I like the dual mass flywheel in this car. Generally speaking, I know that's a big no-no. We don't like dual mass flywheels, we don't like the OEM clutches in BMWs because they go out too quickly, but in this car, they got a lot right. I won't for a second recommend it for track use or say that you should upgrade to the dual mass flywheel, but if you already have a car that has it, these clutches last forever. This doesn't have the same issue that my E39 M5 has, which is what the last video was about if you didn't see it. These clutches have perfectly good life in them, and in general, the dual mass flywheel just makes everything a bit easier. When I'm going around from stoplight to stoplight or stop sign to stop sign, it's just a bit easier to constantly go between first, second, first. That constant back and forth just gets a little easier. Rev matching gets a little bit easier. It's all just a little less demanding of you being perfectly smooth at every turn once you have that dual mass flywheel. Again, I get it. For track use, it's totally out. I don't recommend it. But for street use like this with the occasional back road driving, I think the stock dual mass flywheel is fine. Seeing as this car was made 25 years ago, the creature comforts aren't entirely up to date. This car didn't come with heated seats, nor did most E36 M3s. The infotainment system consists of a cassette player and a 6 CD changer because I took out the Android Auto unit since I'm selling this car. But in general, it doesn't take much to bring this car up to what is, in my opinion, an acceptable standard of modern. Again, I had a unit for this that had Android Auto on it, and it honestly had just about everything I needed. It had maps, and it had the ability to play music through my phone. What more could you really ask for in a car this old? Now, it's probably worth talking about cost of these vehicles, although I'm not going to get into the specifics because one of them is for sale on Cars and Bids right now, and I don't really want to talk too much about finances while that is up for auction. Needless to say, this one cost more. I put more into it, I've been developing it for 5 years now, and a track car is inherently going to cost more than just keeping a daily driver up and running. In fact, if you don't include the purchasing cost of either car, I've spent many times more on this one than I have on the daily driver. Because on the daily, all I did was put some better coilovers on it, some different tires, and the rest was just basic maintenance. It didn't really cost me that much to own for 2 years. So you might be asking, Jason, why sell this car? I just got through telling you about how it's a great daily driver and it kind of checks a lot of the boxes. It may not be as good as the track car, but that's just because they're built for separate purposes. Well, the answer is I got a little bored. When I bought this car originally, the goal was just to own another E36. I already had parts for it, I already had the knowledge of how to wrench on it. Owning one that I daily drove should be easy, especially a pretty clean one like this that didn't need much work in the first place. Now here I am 2 years later after having dailied this car for about that time, and to be honest, I just want to move on to something different. I already have another E36 and I'm not really losing anything. And to be honest, I did reap the benefits that I expected to reap. I knew how to work on this car already, there wasn't too much to do on it, and the few things that there were to do on it were easy to do because I'd already done them on my track car. I was able to drive a fun sports car as a daily driver, save time and money on working on it myself. It was pretty good. But now I've moved on to a different daily driver, one that will cost far more and be a far worse financial decision going forward, but that's the nature of owning cars in general, especially old BMWs. That said, if you're interested in this car, it's still up for sale on Cars and Bids right now, and if you're watching this video within 1 day of it coming out, you still have a chance to bid on it, so I'll leave a link in the description so that you can go check that out. As always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, it helps me out so much. We're almost at 100 subscribers, and I'm hoping to hit that goal soon. Leave a comment while you're down there. I love to hear what you guys have to say. I read all the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Bolt-in steering rack from the factory. Oh,